A 76-kilometer strip of water. That's all it takes to control nearly 5% of global trade. For over a century, the Panama Canal has been one of the most powerful choke points in the world economy. Every day, billions of dollars in goods pass through it. Oil, containers, raw materials, all moving between two oceans, all relying on a system built over 100 years ago. And then, in just 1 year, it almost broke. A historic drought hit Panama between 2023 and 2024. Water levels dropped. Transit slots were cut nearly in half, from around 36 ships a day to just 18. Thousands of vessels were delayed or rerouted. Global supply chains felt the pressure, and more than $1 billion in revenue disappeared. But the real problem wasn't the drought. It was what the drought revealed. The entire system depends on freshwater, massive amounts of it. Every ship that passes through drains millions of gallons that can't be reused. And as ships get bigger, that demand only grows. Panama couldn't change the weather. It couldn't expand the land. So it made a decision. Not to fix the canal, but to move beyond it. What they are building now is not an upgrade. It's something much bigger, a system designed to survive failure, a system designed to control flow, not just support it. Because this is no longer just about transportation. So the real question is, how does a 100-year-old system become obsolete after just one dry season?
Voice generated by VB.VN.
The Panama Canal is often described as a shortcut, a narrow passage between two oceans. But that description misses the real story. This is not just a canal. It is a machine, a massive, water-powered system that lifts entire ships above sea level, moves them across land, and lowers them back down on the other side. And that machine runs on one critical resource: freshwater. Every time a single ship enters the lock system, around 52 million gallons of freshwater are released. The ship rises, crosses, and descends, and that water, it flows out into the ocean, and it's gone. It doesn't get recycled. It doesn't come back. Now multiply that by dozens of ships per day. The scale becomes hard to ignore. For decades, this system worked because it was built for a different world. Smaller ships, lower volumes, slower trade. The canal was designed in the early 20th century, when global supply chains were simpler and far less demanding. But today's reality looks completely different. Modern cargo ships are up to 2.4 times larger than the ones the canal was originally built for. They carry more containers, more fuel, more everything, and every additional ton increases the strain on the system. Even with newer locks that recycle some water, total demand keeps rising. Because the problem isn't efficiency, it's scale. Global trade has outgrown the physical limits of the canal. And that creates a dangerous imbalance.
Experience AI voice technology at VB.VN.
On one side, you have rising demand. On the other, a fixed natural resource: water. When that balance holds, the system works. But when it breaks, everything starts to slow down. Delays increase, costs rise, routes shift. Because supply chains don't wait. They adapt. And when a critical choke point like Panama starts to fail, the entire network begins searching for alternatives. Which leads to a much bigger question. What happens when global demand no longer fits inside the limits of a system built a century ago? And more importantly, who controls what comes next? 2 dry seasons in a row. Not 1, 2. That's all it took to push one of the most critical trade routes in the world to the edge. Rainfall dropped, reservoir levels fell, and suddenly, the Panama Canal couldn't do what it had done reliably for over a century. Transit capacity was cut almost in half. From around 36 ships per day, down to just 18. That's not a small disruption. That's a system-level shock. Shipping companies were forced to make decisions fast. Some ships waited days, even weeks, just to get a slot. Others didn't wait at all. They rerouted around South America, through the Suez Canal, anywhere but Panama. And every reroute came at a cost. Longer distances, higher fuel consumption, delayed deliveries, rising insurance premiums. The entire cost structure of global shipping started to shift. Suddenly, Panama was no longer the default route. And that changes everything. Because global trade depends on predictability. Companies plan months ahead. Routes are optimized down to the hour. When a choke point like Panama becomes unreliable, the system doesn't pause.
iVoice powered by VB.VN.
It adapts. Carriers diversify routes. Supply chains spread risk. New corridors start to gain attention. What was once a single dominant pathway becomes just one option among many. And once that shift begins, it's hard to reverse. Because trust is fragile. It takes decades to build. And only one crisis to break. What happened in Panama wasn't just a temporary disruption. It was a signal, a warning that even the most established infrastructure can fail under pressure. And when that happens, competitors don't wait. They move. New routes get funded. Alternative logistics networks expand. Governments and corporations start asking the same question at the same time. What if Panama can't keep up? Because when a choke point weakens, the entire system starts to rebalance. Power shifts. Money moves. Control changes hands. So the real question is no longer about drought. It's this. If Panama fails to hold its position, who steps in to take its place? More than 2,000 Jaha ships disappeared from the canal in a single year. Not delayed, not rescheduled. Gone. That's the scale of disruption Panama faced during the drought. And with those missing transits came over $1 billion in lost revenue. In just 1 year. But that number is only the surface. Because the Panama Canal is not just a national asset. It is a global artery. Roughly 5% of all maritime trade flows through this narrow strip of land. That means what happens here doesn't stay here. It ripples outward across continents, industries, and entire economies. 170 countries depend on it. Nearly 1.900 ports are connected through it. So when capacity drops, the impact multiplies. Cargo gets delayed, inventories run tight, manufacturing schedules shift, energy shipments arrive late, retail prices begin to move. What starts as a water shortage in Panama quickly becomes a cost increase in the United States, a delay in Europe, a disruption in Asia. This is not a local problem. This is systemic risk. Because global trade is built on efficiency, on timing, on predictable flow, and when one of the most important choke points in that system becomes unstable, the entire network starts to feel the strain.
Text-to-speech platform by VB.VN.
And here's where it gets more interesting. Because disruption doesn't just create losses. It creates opportunity. While Panama was struggling with capacity, alternative routes started gaining traction. The Suez Canal saw shifts in traffic. Overland rail connections between continents became more attractive. Even long-discussed Arctic routes started to re-enter strategic conversations. Competitors don't need Panama to fail completely. They just need it to become unreliable. Because in global trade, reliability is power. And once that perception changes, money begins to move, investments shift, infrastructure gets built elsewhere, new corridors rise, slowly at first, then all at once. So this isn't just about how much Panama lost. It's about who stands to gain. Because every weakened choke point creates a window. A window for someone else to take control of the flow. So the real question is, who is already moving to exploit this weakness? And what happens if they succeed? Panama is not building another canal. That would be the obvious move. Bigger locks, more water, higher capacity. But they didn't choose that path. Instead, they are building something far more ambitious. 5 parallel systems, all running across the same 76-kilometer strip of land. Rail, pipeline, road, ports, and water infrastructure. At first glance, it looks like redundancy. Backup systems in case the canal fails again. But that's not what this is. This is strategy. Each layer is designed to take pressure off the canal, while quietly capturing a different part of global trade. The pipeline is the clearest example. Instead of sending gas tankers through the canal, ships offload on one side. The fuel moves underground, then reloads on the other side. No waiting, no locks, no freshwater required. Every tanker that avoids the canal frees up space for higher value cargo. That's not backup. That's optimization. The rail system does something similar. Containers that would normally pass through the canal can now move across land in under an hour. Faster turnaround, lower congestion, more flexibility for carriers that can't afford delays. And then there's the road network. Designed for vehicles, machinery, oversized cargo, the kind of freight that doesn't fit neatly into containers. Instead of forcing everything through one system, Panama is creating multiple pathways for different types of goods.
Synthetic voice by VB.VN.
At the center of all this are the ports. New, high-capacity terminals on both coasts, built to connect every layer together. Rail feeds into ports, pipeline feeds into ports, road connects directly into ports. This is where cargo gets sorted, stored, redirected. This is where control happens. Because once everything flows through the same hubs, Panama doesn't just move goods. It manages them. What looks like diversification is actually consolidation. Risk is spread across systems, but control is pulled into one place. And that changes the game. Because Panama is no longer relying on a single canal to survive the next crisis. It's building an entire platform designed to absorb shocks, reroute flows, and keep trade moving no matter what fails. So the real question is no longer whether the canal can handle demand. It's this. If this isn't just a backup system, what exactly is Panama turning itself into? This is not about shipping. That's the illusion. What Panama is building is not just a faster way to move cargo from one ocean to another. It's something much deeper, something far more strategic. This is about controlling flow. Not just goods, but energy. And the entire logistics chain that connects them. Think about what's actually happening. A container arrives from Asia. Energy shipments arrive from the United States. Raw materials move between continents. And now, all of it can pass through the same narrow strip of land, but through different systems. All controlled by the same country. The canal is just one layer. The pipeline moves gas across the isthmus without touching water, and at full capacity, it could generate more revenue than the canal itself, not because it's bigger, but because energy margins are higher, and demand is more predictable. Then come the ports. For decades, foreign companies controlled the terminals surrounding the canal. That meant Panama had geography, but not full control. That has changed. Now, Panama is building and owning the next generation of megaports on both coasts. Every ship that arrives, every container that gets transferred, every drop of fuel that gets loaded, passes through infrastructure tied back to the same system.
Create professional voiceovers with VB.VN.
This is no longer a transit point. It's a control point. Because when rail, road, pipeline, and canal all connect into the same hubs, something powerful happens. Flow becomes programmable. Cargo can be redirected. Energy can be rerouted. Delays in one system can be absorbed by another. And most importantly, every movement can be monetized. This is how you move from being part of the supply chain to controlling it. Panama is no longer just facilitating global trade. It is positioning itself as the gatekeeper of it. And in a world where supply chains are becoming more fragile, more fragmented, and more strategic, that position is incredibly valuable. Because control over flow means control over timing. Control over timing means control over cost. And control over cost is control over money. So the real question is no longer what Panama is building. It's this. If one country starts controlling both the movement of goods and the flow of energy through the same choke point, who, exactly, is losing power in the process? After 2031, the numbers will look impressive. Annual revenue is expected to exceed $8 billion. Total economic value could surpass $60 billion by 2050. But those numbers are not the real story. Because what Panama is building is no longer just a route. It's a system. A platform. One that doesn't depend on a single point of failure. If drought hits again, the canal slows down. But rail keeps moving. Pipelines keep flowing. Road networks keep transferring cargo. Trade doesn't stop. It reroutes. That's the difference. Before, the Panama Canal was a choke point. Now, Panama is turning itself into a network. A system designed to absorb shocks, adapt in real time, and keep global trade moving no matter what breaks. And here's the key. No other location has this combination. Geography. Infrastructure. Integration. You can build a canal. You can build a railway. You can build ports. But building all of them, on the same narrow strip of land, fully connected, fully coordinated, is something no other country has managed to replicate. This is not an upgrade. This is evolution. Panama is moving from being part of global trade to becoming the platform that global trade depends on. And when that happens, the nature of power changes. Because controlling routes is one thing.
VB.VN, Vietnam's leading text-to-speech solution.
Controlling systems is something else entirely. So the final question is not about infrastructure. It's this. When one country controls the narrow passage where goods, energy, and logistics all converge, what happens to the balance of power in the global economy?